Thank you very much for the invitation, Natalia, the organizer. Thank you very much, Alison, for putting this whole show together. I think it's a great effort, and I think it will show. And I have to make a disclosure. I work also for Nestle Nutrition Mexico, where I am in charge of the medical affairs back in my country. And as you might see, Mexico is not necessarily down south. We actually belong to the northern North America. And you can see that here's Mexico. There's supposed to be a wall here, but there's no wall yet. We hope there will never be. And it's a very beautiful country. It's quite large. It's 2 million square kilometers. It seems like small because it's next to the United States, but it's quite large. And we have like 120 million Mexicans, and they are pretty much all over the world. They're quite joyful. We're always laughing. And there's 2 million babies born each year. So pediatrics and pediatric nutrition is a very important matter to our population. And Mexico is a very third world country that's growing into a very better economy. As you might know, we have like both ends of the economic status. We have the most rich, one of the most rich persons in the world, and we have a lot of poverty. But still we have very interesting people, you know, like good sports people like Chicharito, that's doing a lot of goals in Europe, and we have a lot of culture and tradition that's been, you know, talked about all over with this, you know, our traditions about the Day of the Dead, and there's a lot going on, and that makes a lot of successful people, you know, they don't like us for this because the last 4 years the Oscars go for for Mexicans in the United States, so we're getting popular there, and probably not all over. So as I was saying, Mexico is has a very large surface. As you can tell, all these European countries fit in my country, and we have a very large seashore, but both in the Gulf of Mexico and then the Pacific Ocean, and still we just eat like 1 pound per capita of fish per year. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, misunderstanding on nutrition and on that has to do with our culture. You can imagine there's huge desert up north, but there's fantastic jungles and places where a lot of vegetables and fruits are grown, and even though we're not eating them, all this fish, all this, we're not having them, and the babies are not. So let me tell you, there is a lot of data on the FIT study, and I will only focus this morning on 2 of the great problems that my country has, and the main nutritional problem is obesity, and we're talking about huge amounts of Mexican kids that are obese. And these are the national surveys from 1999, 2006, and 2012, which will show you that kids under 5 years of age have grown larger, like 7.8% of kids under that age were obese or overweight in 1999, and almost 10% by 2012. But the big thing happens between 5 and 11 years of age, and then in the teenagers, you see that they will go from 28% all the way to 37% in 2012, and the teenagers will also go all the way to 35%. This is a big problem because there's a pattern that's been learned that might have to do with this increased consumption of foods and energy. So I will focus mainly in these 2 problems. First, the energy problem that has to do with obesity, and this other burden that is the micronutrient deficiency, which has to do with anemia. This is anemia, iron deficiency anemia. It's not iron deficiency, it's anemia. And we had, back in '99, almost 55% kids between 12 and 24 months of age with anemia. And it has lowered all the way down to 38%. But 38% is way too far. It's way too dangerous for any population to have kids growing with this problem. And as you will see, it will like automatically diminish all the way to the 4th birthday of kids, down to 13.7%. And this might have to do with the way and the patterns that kids are eating early in life. And let me help you remember the first slide that Allison showed us this morning, in which there was a huge consumption of milk early in life for the kids, all the way to their 5th birthday. But this is the pattern I want you to stress out. Sweets and salty snacks. This will happen very early in life, as early as 6 to 8 months of age. And this pattern will stay, and that will remain all the way through adulthood. This is very interesting because Mexican babies are treated as babies, but they actually have the same pattern of food consumption as adults. So just keep this in mind. You will see this. There's a large amount of proteins, some amount of grains, but you'll see that milks tend to disappear early in Mexican kids' lives. I will not talk today about salty snacks. It is a problem. Our kids are consuming a lot of salt, a lot of sodium, and those will be shown in, you can look for that data on our publications of the FIT studies. This is the one that actually can make a lot of more sense to us, because we explain here about the feeding patterns that might be explaining the obesity prevention or the obesity problem. And there's 3 other papers that came out from the same study, from the same FIT study, that have to do with micronutrients. The other ones of the food sources of energy, that's the last paper last year, and increased snacking and eating occasions in Mexico. Just to let you know, we do consume a lot of salty snacks early in life, and it might have to do with soccer. There's a lot of soccer going on, so you have to pick your team very early, and you have to snack salty chips and salty stuff. There is a lot of that early in life. I will not show that data, but that's also available, how kids are snacking a lot of salty and also a lot of energy going in there. Now, this FIT study for Mexico was done under the Encuesta Nacional of 2012, ENSANUD we call it, and it's a cross-sectional countrywide survey. It was conducted from October 2011 to 2012. May 2012, and more than over 50,000 households were interviewed, and there's dietary data only of 10,000 responders. And the sample of children under from birth to 4 years of age is this 2,057. So it's a fair amount. It's a very well-designed national survey, and it has a good representativity of the 4 major geographical areas. As Allison told you, we have that in this survey. I used this slide just to show you that this is the way that socioeconomical status was selected according to these criteria of household characteristics, from types of floor, walls, ceiling in a home, availability of running water, electrodomestics, and having a car. So it's quite well divided in 3 tertiles: 36.5%, 34.5%, and 29% in the higher tertile. And interestingly, for this group, the weight status is very clear. It's only 2.6%. Nationwide, for the whole rest of the survey, it goes down to 1.6%. I mean, Undernutrition, macronutrient undernutrition is not a problem anymore in Mexico, but overweight is. Okay, so in this sample, 8.4% of babies were overweight. Now, food groups included here, I will show you, are milks, grains, fruits, vegetables, and sweets. Sweets, we will talk about a little bit about them later on this morning. And the socioeconomical status are low, medium, and high. There's data related to energy, iron, and zinc, calcium, vitamin D, and sodium. I will not show them to you. Calcium is not a problem. Vitamin D is, but we still don't have very clear implications or follow-up on vitamin D deficiency in our country. So I'll just show you these two big problems in the population. So to start off, let me show you that in this the amount of energy compared to in the red squares, you'll find the estimated energy requirement. By 5 months of age, it is pretty much the same, but between 6 to 11 years, there's almost a 70 kilocalorie per day difference that will increase almost to 200 and some calories for the third birthday. So there's a lot of energy coming in. And it starts quite early, like at 6 to 11 months of age. By 12 months, there's almost 130 calories of difference in this for the estimated energy requirement, and that's a big problem. Now, there's another big problem that has to do with breastfeeding. Breastfeeding has been a problem since back from the 80s. But we've been losing track of a lot of exclusive breastfeeding that will go as low as 14.4% of exclusive breastfeeding by 6 months of age. 14.4. And when in this study, it's a very interesting notion that when moms are asked, how many months did you breastfeed your child? We're talking about not exclusive breastfeeding, but any breastfeeding, and it goes all the way to 66%. So there's like a 50% gap of people that are not exclusively breastfeeding, babies that are not getting exclusive breast milk, but what are they getting, and how much does this have to do with the extra energy that's coming in? Let me show you. First, for milk, what's going on early in this population, even if they're getting breast milk, okay, they are getting also whole cow's milk early in life, like 10% around 4 to 5 months and 30% around 6 to 11 months of age. So this shouldn't be here, and the strange thing is that any milk just lowers all the way down to 61% by 3 years of age, and only 60% of kids are drinking milk. I mean, there's like 40% gap of kids that are not drinking milk, but what are they drinking? What are they eating? What's going on? Because breastfeeding clearly disappears by 12 months, and for the 24th month, there's almost none. And you can see that it also follows a trend with socioeconomical status. And this is very interesting because socioeconomical status and the higher levels have less breast milk than in the lower levels. So it might not have to do with income, but in education, right? If there's a little bit of more money, people are not investing in formulas, but they're getting some cow's milk. So that kind of doesn't make sense. Here for the 6 to 11 months of age, there's 30% of kids that are getting cow's milk, some are getting formula, and breast milk is losing its power here. And by 12 months, there's almost none breast milk and a whole bunch of cow's milk. For the nationals' recommendations, cow's milk should be introduced, whole cow's milk could be introduced after 12 months of age. But only 55, and I say probably all the way to 60% of kids are drinking milk. Now, for the iron deficiency burden, there's also a trend. As you could see, Chinese kids eat a lot of cereals. not Mexican babies. Mexican babies for complementary feeding at 6 months are only consuming 9% of them are consuming cereals. And these infant cereals it does have to do with socioeconomical status, but 61% of kids are not receiving their daily requirement. And the mean consumption of intake of iron is 6.7 milligrams per day with a median of 3.4. So there's a large amount of kids that are not receiving their iron, and it's not going through cereals, but it's not going into meat either. Culturally, kids in Mexico will not eat meat because it has to do with unhealthy form of consuming food. That will be left for the grown-ups. Red meat is not like, it's a synonym of not necessarily good red meat. So kids are only eating like 2 plus 5, like 7% of kids are eating meat in the first year of life, and only 25% after their first birthday. And this will also have to do with economic income. Now, you can see here there's a trend of infant cereals that has to fight with tortillas. Tortillas are iron-fortified whole grain of maize that's parboiled, and it will come high in low socioeconomic status and low in this other population in the higher socioeconomic status. So at some point, this might be the reason that there's a lowering from 55 to 38% of anemia in the first year of life, because iron has been maize has been fortified since the 90s, and that might be the explanation that a large amount of low socioeconomic status kids are getting tortilla, and they will eat tortilla a lot more frequently after 12 months of age. A lot more tortilla with iron will be coming in, and that might explain why anemia is coming down after the 2 years of age. Now, let me show you this other part of the nutrients that account for the main sources of iron. That will be formula in the first 2 years. And after that, cow's milk. You know cow's milk doesn't have enough iron, but you can tell this shows a picture why people are not, or kids are not getting enough iron if this is the first source of iron, and the second ones are soups and stews, and then, and after that, there's probably no more iron fortified in kids' diet, so that might be one of the big problems. Now, us pediatricians are very thorough on prescribing at 6 months of age complementary feeding. And what we start out, it's very traditional to start out with fruits and veggies, okay? But what we found out in the FIT study is that moms are not paying attention to us, or deliberately are, not using it. You can see like 18% of children, or now more than 80% of babies are not getting vegetables on a given day during the survey. And it doesn't get better after 2 years or 3 years of age. And almost 50% of kids are not consuming fruit. Now, this was what we prescribed as doctors, as pediatricians and physicians, and if they're not eating these, what are they eating? And this is the answer: sweets. They're eating sweets early in life, as early as 0 to 5 months of age. 62% for the 6-month-old babies are eating sweets. And it goes all the way to 90% for the second birthday. So this is a big problem, and you can tell what kind of sweets are these babies eating. Well, it's mostly all sorts of sweets, but let me show you: cakes, pies, cookies, sweetbreads, pan de dulce. You've heard about that, and I think there's some sort of like pan de sal here in Filipino. There's all sorts of sweets in that, and there's a large variety. They're very delicious, and there's a bread store almost in every block in Mexico, so it's very available. But that's not the problem. The problem is here in blue. You can see sweetened beverages. Okay, so those sweetened beverages are coming really early as well, 8% before 5 months of age, 21%, and they will go all the way to 80% by 24 months of age. And what are those beverages? Well, you might know the answer by now. Those have to do with fruit-flavored drinks that are, under the 20% range. But look at these. They're purple. Carbonated sodas, abundant in sugars. You know what the name is. And it goes from 8% all the way to 40% by the third birthday. You will see sodas in bottles. You'll see sodas in all sorts of ways. There's all sorts of carbonated and non-carbonated sodas that babies are drinking in my country. So this is a huge burden, and you can tell there's a lot of calories coming in from there. Now, with all this data, we put together a group of national-wide experts. We set it out and said, well, we have to do something. And the thing is that there's a bunch of guides that come for allergic kids and diseased kids and what to do if we have a lot of diarrheas. But for healthy kids, there are few guidelines. So we wrote this paper with Enrique Romero. We set up a group of experts from many national-wide organizations that have to do. IMSS, for example, is the largest social security service for people that have jobs. Hospital Infantil, where I work, belongs also to the state. It attends people that do not have social security, but they need treatment. So there's all these institutions, universities, the academia. This is academic for pediatrics. We got together and started out this recommendations for pediatrics. And some of the frequent questions that come from pediatrics have to do with this, the amount of proportions of food. So these are like very simple pie recommendations in which we will say that from 6 to 8 months, try to keep solids around 30 to 40% of the diet and not more milk. Because we know what kind of milks are coming in here. So first, we have to recommend not to use whole cow's milk under 12 months of age and be very strict about this. And after 12 months, try to put the milk as low as possible because babies were drinking a whole bunch of milk. So as I show you, and even if it doesn't have a lot of iron, that's the main source of iron. It means they're drinking a lot of milk at some point, but not all of them. So these are recommendations for our pediatricians. And we did this also because it's a very frequent question coming from pediatricians. How much will that baby's belly support? Well, we calculated around 30 grams per kilo. So this is like round numbers in which we will recommend 1/4 or 1/2 of a cup, but thinking of having also milk into that belly at the same time. You see, instead of having like 6 or 8 times of eating, and because at some point, babies will be snacking milk early in life, or they will be snacking cookies at these ages. So trying to put them in perspective, how many times should they be fed per day, all the food groups, and making recommendations for every age, and trying to make account for how much of a serving size will they be receiving. And in summary, this is very the take-home messages. Breastfeeding is really low in my country, and it has to do with inappropriate beverages that will be coming in at this age, that will be supplementing breastfeeding, maybe mother's milk. So this is inadequate substitutes having to do with whole cow's milk, but also sweetened beverages that are coming in could be easily, pushed out if we can have better exclusive breastfeeding and better recommendations on breastfeeding. The increased consumption of energy starts really early with complementary feeding. And Mexican kids consume very small amounts of iron-fortified foods. So 61% of the babies are not getting enough their daily recommendation of iron. 50% of babies didn't consume any fruit, and 80% didn't consume any vegetable by early in life. And sweet foods and sweet sugar beverages are consumed very early in the diet and increase rapidly in the first 2 years of life. So this is also one thing that comes out from the National Consensus for Healthy Infants, that it had to be done in response to this Mexico Fits findings. And I also want to acknowledge all the Nestle Research Center group that worked and did this. And in Mexico, this Mexico team that has to do with Nestle and Hospital Infantil that put together the consensus and are helping out with dissemination, like talking around, having spokespersons. These are spokespersons for FIT studies and all the publications. And they are very, very important people for our group. So thank you very much, and I'll also respond to questions to you later on. Thank you.